During this webinar, you will be hearing from Dr. Becky Clark, Dean of Faculty and Curriculum Development, and Sara Jean Barrett, a fourth-year graduating student here at SCNM. So once again, thank you for attending our webinar. We hope you find this presentation both interesting and informative. And with that, let me introduce our first speaker, Sara Jean Barrett. Sara Jean grew up in Cartersville, Georgia, a small town north of Atlanta. She received her bachelor's degree in biology from Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Sara Jean recently moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she plans to open her own practice in the fall. While attending SCNM, Sara Jean was the head tutor for the Doctory Development Center and enjoyed running and growing this crucial resource for students. Sara Jean is passionate about naturopathic medicine and is excited to start seeing patients. In her spare time, she enjoys cooking, hiking, biking, and spending time with her fiancé and their dog Charlie. So with that, let me switch this over to Sara Jean.
Hi, I'm Sara Jean, and I'll be talking to you today about 6 things you should know before entering medical school. Are you an auditory learner who needs to record the lectures so you can listen again to review? A visual learner who needs to draw diagrams and pictures of the material? A kinesthetic learner who needs to rewrite notes and move while you learn? Or a combination? There are short quizzes available in the Doctory Development Center, otherwise known as the DDC, or online. I also have a few links listed on the slide that can help you as well. It will take some time to adjust to the immense volume of information that comes your way during medical school, so you want to build good habits from the start. Previewing the material before lecture helps you prepare for what is coming. That way you don't get lost in class and miss out on concepts during lecture. After lecture is over, reviewing the material and picking out the especially important information will also help to solidify it for you and decrease the amount of studying you will need to do before the test. A laptop and backup drive. Even if you are not technology savvy, I suggest you get a laptop. As I said before, there is an incredible volume of information that will be coming your way over the next 4 years, and you are going to need somewhere to put it. I suggest making folders for each class and downloading all the PowerPoints and handouts. Even if you don't need them right now, you're going to want them for reference later. If you learn better by taking notes by hand, that's great, but trust me, when you try to move boxes upon boxes of handwritten notes, you will wish you just put them on the computer. There were some classes where I just wanted to write by hand, and I ended up retyping my notes later so that I had them at my fingertips in the future. You will need access to the internet during class to download handouts and class notes, as well as look up information. A backup drive is crucial. You are spending a lot of money on this valuable information, and you want to protect it. I know of at least 5 students in my class that lost everything from SCNM, either by their computer being stolen or crashing. I backed up my information every quarter, or before I traveled somewhere, but you should probably back it up even more often than that. And here's the IT department's contact information. They can help you access the internet, use my SCNM, and just overall IT support. Sleep. I cannot stress this enough. You may think that you're doing just fine pulling all-nighters to study for tests, but trust me, it's damaging your body and your brain. You want to study smarter, not longer. I made a pact with myself that I would not sleep less than 7 hours per night, and I would aim for 8 hours every night of medical school. There were a few times when chart notes got the better of me, but for the most part, I kept that promise to myself, and I'm very glad that I did. These next 4 years are going to be the most draining of your life, and you need to do all you can to maintain your own health during this process, and that starts with plenty of sleep. Some tips for doing this are when you get home from school. Oh, can you hear me?
Hey, Sara Jean, can you just speak up a little bit? You're coming in really faint.
So when you get home from school, decide what time you need to get up the next day and count back 8 hours. That's the time you need to be in bed. Then think of what you need to do to get done that evening and prioritize so you can be in bed at that time. The key word is prioritize. Do you really need to do all that laundry, or can it wait until Saturday? Really pick what's most important and tackle that first. Don't jeopardize your health. Use your resources. When you first arrive at SCNM, it is overwhelming. Classes start with a bang, and quickly you're caught up in quizzes, and you barely have time to learn your classmates' names. I really recommend using each other as resources for making study guides and study groups. Share with each other. You are on this journey together. You're sitting in a room full of your future colleagues. You will be able to email each other through school email and via My SCNM easily to share information. The DDC is another very important resource. This center is run by the head tutor and has students from almost every quarter that can help you through this process. They can help guide you on your medical journey because they've been there. They can help you with understanding material, figuring out your learning style, etc. The DDC has also created a page on My SCNM called the DDC Academic Resources. This page goes through class by class and gives you pre-made notes and study guides. You must visit this resource. It has been years in the making and it is so helpful. To gain access, log in to My SCNM and go to the group section. Find the DDC Academic Resources and join this group. After that, it will appear in your group section. If you have any trouble finding it, a tutor, a student ambassador, or upperclassman will be happy to help you find it. Other resources are your professors, your lab TAs, the Student Success Center, and library staff are all wonderful people who are here to help you. All you have to do is reach out to them. We have 2 student ambassadors that are here to help you answer questions. Their contact information is on the slide. The first aid for USMLE Step 1 is the book I use to study for the basic science boards that you take after your first 2 years at SCNM. The reason I'm bringing this book up now as you enter school is that it's a great resource for you while you're learning the material. The book takes a broad look with a systems approach to all the basic sciences. My suggestion for the best way to use this book is to preview for classes with it. By that I mean, if you're learning the kidney next week, go through the kidney section of this book over the weekend to give yourself a nice overview of understanding, so the details you learn over the week will make more sense. Then the weekend after you learn the kidney, use this book as you review your notes and add anything to the book that will help you study for boards. I just wrote all over the margins. I did this and it was such an incredible help. This is the major resource I use to pass my basic science boards, and I highly recommend getting and using this book now. Some other notes. You will need scrubs for your first day at school in the labs. You can go to Apparel Pro, which is just down the street on University, and they give a discount to SCNM students. Just bring your student ID. You will also need a lab coat, but the library committee sells used lab coats for a very reasonable price, so I would wait for that sale. And last but not least, good luck. SCNM was such a rewarding experience, and I'm so glad that I chose this program. Enjoy your journey.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you for being here. I want to share 4 tips for success for your first year of medical school at SCNM. In order to do that, I need to preview with you what our first year curriculum looks like. So for these tips to make sense, you need to know what the first year curriculum is. So in the first year, you will take 3 blocks. The first block is your human biology block, and there's a large amount of time devoted to this because human biology lays the foundation for everything you will do as a doctor. And you know, human biology includes anatomy, physiology, microbiology, biochemistry, etc. You will also take clinical practice courses and labs. And these courses are very critical to your success as a doctor, and we value them so highly that we schedule them beginning on the first day you're here at 8 a.m. Clinical practice allows you to practice your clinical skills, and from the first day you're here, we expect you to begin thinking and feeling like a doctor. We also have history and philosophy of naturopathic medicine that spans your entire first year. This is quite popular with students because it helps them renew and refresh why they're here when their other classes are, as Sara Jean said, coming hard and fast. So this is quite popular. So all 3 of these blocks happen the entire first year. So you take human biology your first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter, along with clinical practice and history and philosophy. Let me say more about the clinical practice courses because that is so important to your success as a doctor. We value it so much that the second you arrive, we issue your medical equipment like your stethoscope, etc. You will use this equipment to begin practicing on each other. And that's really the lowest level of practice we can provide you for your clinical skills. And it's a very important step because as you begin using your medical equipment, you want to be able to use it in such a way that it becomes second nature. And how better to begin doing that than with your classmates who are also doing the same thing. Also in your first year, you will do 60 face-to-face hours in field observation with naturopathic doctors and other doctors, with the majority of your time being spent with naturopathic doctors. You're actually a part of their practice and you shadow them in their practice so you can see how one operates and you can observe how the experienced physician deals with patients, etc. This field observation program is extremely popular with our students and many of them want to do more than 60 hours. During your first year, we also assign you to our medical center medicinary and lab. This is also very important for your future success because in your practice, you will have a medicinary and a lab, or you will partner with another medicinary and lab. And as a physician and as a business person, you will need to know how each of these operate in order to have successful practice. Then at the end of the first year, we will ask you to begin practicing your clinical skills with standardized patients. Now, if you're not sure what a standardized patient is an actor, a person who has been trained to take on the role of a patient. So these standardized patients come to you like real patients. They have symptoms and they have concerns, and you have to determine how to use your medical equipment with them, what labs to order, and how to actually resolve their issues. This is a great next step in preparing and practicing your clinical skills because remember, I mentioned that you will first practice on each other. Then you practice on standardized patients, so not quite a real patient, but almost. And then in your third year, you start working with real patients. This is great because you have such a logical progression of practicing your skills with more and more clinical responsibility that when you get before real patients, you have the confidence that you need to do a good job. And when we first assigned you to your clinical clerkships in the medical center and in our extended site community clinics, you will function as a secondary student and have the opportunity to observe and support and help students with a lot more clinical experience who are farther along in the program than you are, and you'll get to observe how they do things and talk to them about how they resolve issues and work with patients along with your attending physician, of course, who is very experienced. I also want to say something about our entire curriculum very quickly. I mentioned a logical progression of experience in developing your clinical skills. We've actually planned this logical progression of your curriculum with all of your courses, your labs, and your clinical clerkships here. In order for curriculum to be a success, it must be aligned vertically and horizontally. So vertical curriculum alignment means that when you take courses in your first year, those courses lay the foundation for your second year, and then the first and second years lay the foundation for the third year, etc., etc. So we've been very purposeful in how we have organized this curriculum so that one course, one concept, one experience builds upon another from year to year. So that's your vertical curriculum alignment. The horizontal curriculum alignment is also necessary for success, and that means within the same year that courses connect to each other and that faculty know what's being taught in one course so that when they teach their course, they're supporting that and they're aligning what they teach to what you're learning in other courses within the same year. So we've been very purposeful in doing this because we want to provide you the very best curriculum so that you can be a successful naturopathic doctor. Now, finally, the 4 tips for success in your first year. Now they'll make sense to you, I think. So the first tip is to obtain excellent resources. Sara Jean already mentioned the USMLE Step 1, and I would agree with her. That is an excellent resource. 2 other resources that you cannot, in my opinion, do without is a good anatomy atlas. One that is required here is the Gray's Atlas of Anatomy. There are other very good ones. Some students choose to purchase required textbooks and others do not. My suggestion is that you purchase the textbooks, but if you choose not to purchase some of them, one that you absolutely want to get is this Gray's Atlas of Anatomy, or another very good anatomy book that looks just like this one. Now, the reason this one has been so successful is because it is comprised of diagrams and photos that are clearly labeled, and it does not include text. You have nothing but diagrams and photos over and over and over. And I know some of our faculty members who continue as doctors to using this book today because the photos in the book are so clearly done and the diagrams are so well done. The second resource that I believe that you cannot do without is a good medical terminology book. This medical terminology book is a book that, again, many of our faculty members use this even today. I know one of our faculty members who's been practicing for 20 years still depends upon this book because it is such a great resource. This book will give you a CD where you can play games like concentration and other medical terminology games to help test yourself. Now, it's not just important that you have this for your future practice, but remember that Sara Jean mentioned to you that when you start your classes, that information will be coming to you very quickly, and there will be a lot of information there. In fact, some of our students say that it feels like being hit with a fire hose in the face. Now, that's not to frighten you at all, but that is to be honest with you about the large amount of information that you will be required to know as a future doctor. This amount of information is the same amount of information despite what medical school you attend, because it is critical to your future success with patients. So I highly recommend both of these books, and that's the first tip. So let's go to the second tip. As I get into the second tip, I want to talk to you about something that Sara Jean touched on, and that is procrastination. Don't do it. Don't procrastinate, because you notice in this cartoon it says the longer you wait, the worse it gets. I have seen this happen to students, and then they're overwhelmed and they get behind. It is very critical that you stay on top of everything that's happening, and that means to pace your studying. You need to spend at least 1 or 2 days a week reviewing everything that was covered in your classes and labs that week. Put it on your calendar, mark your calendar, and follow your calendar. This is the very best piece of advice I can give you. Turn off the TV, throw your cell phone out the window, whatever it takes, get away from family or partners or friends, and do this every single week. You do not want to wait to the last minute to begin studying for exams, because it will not work. Let me also say to you that waiting to the last minute may be something to study, may be something that you've been able to do in prior degree programs that you've been involved in. I have heard many students say, well, Dr. Clark, I've had a 4.0 in everything I've ever done, and I've never had to study. Why am I having to do it now? Well, first of all, like Sara Jean and I both have said, you have a lot of information to learn in a short period of time. It's not something that you can cram a night or two before the exam or the quiz and get. So you must be very dedicated and committed to making sure that you're taking time each week to review the notes, go over the notes, and make sure that you understand those. So that's the second tip. Now, the third tip has to do with practicing your clinical skills. So let's say that you've taken the first tip and the second tip, and you have studied weekly and you've stayed on top of all the information you need to know, and you feel like you have it down, that you greatly understand it. Can you actually apply those to patients? Well, certainly that's the second very important part of medical school, is being able to apply what you've learned to your patients. And so the third tip is to practice your clinical skills regularly. The early clinical practice courses that I've spoken to you about in the first year, you need to use those to your advantage. And when you're learning something like a physical exam or charting or taking a history, you want to practice those regularly because those can be lost quickly if you do not stay on top of those. Now, your clinical skills are so critical to your success that we make sure that you have reached a certain level of competency in your clinical skills before you can actually move forward in your program. We have 4 clinical milestone exams. The first happens at the end of quarter 3. Prior to this exam, you will have had the entire year to practice your clinical skills. Many times the practice will occur in class and in lab, but you'll need to do it outside of class and lab also. This is where you actually are working with a standardized patient, and you're listening to their problems, you're taking their history, and you're actually working with them as a patient. And that's the way the exam will work. All the other exams work the exact same way, but they are a higher level of understanding and practice of those clinical skills. Now, that's a great thing, because you start out with an exam that's at a very simple level with clinical skills, and you move to higher and higher levels, so that by the time you take your clinic exit milestone exam in quarter 14, you will be completely confident and totally prepared to have your practice and work with your patients. Notice at the bottom of this slide, there are areas of competency in which you will be tested. And these are your clinical skills. So you have history taking, physical exam, your diagnosis, interpersonal skills and professionalism, and then charting. So the fourth tip is to make great use of your SCNM support team. We are here to help you. We want to do everything we can to support you, and please take advantage of that. Too many times I hear students say, well, I know I should have worked with the tutoring center, or I know I should have contacted the Dean of Students, Dr. McMichael, but I didn't do it. Don't be that way. Don't do it. Use these people. Use us. We are here to help you and support you. And notice the 3 people that are listed on this page. Dr. McMichael, our Dean of Students, Tammy Guttick, who is our academic advisor, who you will know very well before you leave here. She will help you with registering for all of your courses and knowing what you need to take when. Then Tanya Russell, who is a great SGA president. She is a student advocate and works very hard for you, so you certainly will want to contact her. Also, Dr. Joni Olhausen is our Dean of Medical Education, and she's here to help. The next person is me, and I'm here to help you. And then in your first year especially, you will be taught by Dr. Larity and his department of professors in the basic sciences. Dr. Larity is the chair of basic science of the basic sciences department, so you'll definitely want to be in contact with him. Now, after you're here, we will ask a few things of you to help us to make sure that we are serving you well and providing the best possible curriculum. SCNM prides itself on leading the naturopathic profession in assessment. Educational assessment is the process of documenting in measurable terms students' knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs. Why do we collect this information, and why do we ask you to complete inventories and course evaluations? We do this because we care about your experience here. We want it to be the very best possible, and only you can tell us how it's going. We can look and we think we might know, but until you tell us the way it's going, we don't really know. So when you come to us, please fill out your student satisfaction inventory, and also please complete your online course evaluations of your courses and instructors. That will be most helpful to us. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'll turn it back over to Jody.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. We will now open the floor for questions, so feel free to use that box like I had told you to submit your questions, as well as we have some questions that came through to us via our website, so I'll acknowledge those as well. You can always request information from me at j.durham@scnm.edu, and let's go ahead and get into the questions. My first question is probably going to be to Sara Jean. Sara Jean, what was the most challenging part for you going into medical school?
I think the most challenging part going into medical school was the adjustment. I went to a standard university and I thought it was challenging, but then I came to SCNM and it really is a lot of information very quickly. So I think that the first few weeks was a big adjustment period of kind of figuring out, how do I study? How do I get all this information into my brain? How do I survive in this environment? And after those first couple of weeks, you really fall into a pattern and figure out the best way to go about doing things. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is adjusting to the volume of information that you're getting every day.
Awesome. Thanks, Sara Jean. My next one, do we need to wait for classes to begin before signing up for tutoring? So probably either one of you could answer that one.
I don't think you need to wait for classes to begin. The head tutor now, her name is Catherine Lawrence, and again, a student ambassador will be able to hook you up with her. She can help you find a tutor, and we have a website for the tutoring as well that I'm sure Jody can probably email to the attendees or put somewhere for you to see. And that lists all the tutors we have available, their background, what they specialize in. So you can always contact a tutor before you even start classes.
Perfect. Thanks, Sara Jean. I'm going to turn this one over to Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark, how frequently are tests given on an average?
So that's a great question. I would say in human biology that you will have tests fairly frequently. And the reason I say that is because Dr. Larity, who I mentioned is the chair of the basic sciences, Dr. Larity and his team of professors plan numerous quizzes in human biology. They do this because they've learned over the years that this is one way to make sure that students keep looking at the information, studying the information, and retaining the information. So you will have frequent quizzes. Dr. Larity and his team also use a teaching methodology called team-based learning, or TBL for short. This is where you work in teams to solve patient cases. Now, in your first year, as you could guess, these patient cases will be simple patient cases because you're in your first year of medical school. But in doing team-based learning, the team-based learning also requires quizzes. So you will have quizzes in TBL. Then you will have a midterm exam and a final exam in your human biology. And the reason I'm focusing on human biology right now is because it's the biggest chunk of your time during the first year. Now, Dr. Larity and his team have worked very hard to make your test, your midterm test, and your final exam in human biology mimic the NPLEX 1. So this is your licensing exam, the first section on the basic sciences that Sara Jean mentioned. They've worked very hard to make the midterm and the final in human biology very similar to the way the questions are organized on the NCLEX. This is great for you so that when you get to the NCLEX, you'll pass it. You'll already be familiar with the format of that kind of testing, and you will have had so much practice that you will not be hung up on that. You can actually focus on what the questions are asking you. Dr. Larity and his team also use item discrimination analysis software, again, to make sure that their exam questions are written very well, and this software provides statistics that helps them know if the questions are written well or not. So that's human biology. In your clinical practice, you will have the practical exam that I mentioned at the end of the first year where you demonstrate your clinical skills. Prior to that, you will have tests and quizzes, not as many as in human biology. And the same thing happens with your history and philosophy. There will be quizzes, midterm and final, and also in history and philosophy, you will write a reflection paper about your attitudes toward the principles of naturopathic medicine. So that summarizes your first year.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I have another question that may go back to you. At the end of the fourth year, is there still a revisit of naturopathic history and philosophy as there was with the old curriculum?
Yes, there actually is that. So I mentioned in the first year that you will have history and philosophy all throughout. You will have classes all throughout your first year. Again, quite popular with students because this helps you know how the medicine started, what are the beliefs behind the medicine. It's also really cool because all of our very experienced physicians come and speak in that class to you about their areas of expertise, like homeopathy, environmental medicine, nutrition, etc. I mentioned that you would write this reflection paper. At the end of that's in the first year, at the end of your fourth year, you will revisit all of the principles and your attitudes and beliefs toward them, your commitment to them, and the professor, Dr. Nick Baratovich, who's actually one of the founders of the school and a really fun guy, you'll like him very much, he will actually lead this end time with history and philosophy so that you can bring it all back together, because what happens between the first year history and philosophy and then what you do at the end is that history and philosophy is integrated throughout all the other courses so that by the time you are ready to graduate, you have a very firm foundation in what you think and feel about the medicine. That's critical to your practice because we don't want you to adopt what we think about it. We want you to develop your own philosophy. And this culmination at the end with history and philosophy will help you do that.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Clark. I'm going to switch us over to Sara Jean, I think. Sara Jean, which clubs and organizations were you involved in, and which organizations would you recommend that are available here at SCNM?
Wow, that is a big question. We have a lot of organizations at SCNM, and I can't even keep up with them. There's so many that pop up. Our students are so involved, and we want to reach out to the community. We have Naturopaths Without Borders, which goes down to Mexico and helps underprivileged people there. We have an organization that is that works on what's it called? Working in Washington. They go to DC and they talk to senators. That's called ENACT. Pretty much anything you want to do, you can do at SCNM, and there might already be an organization that does it. I was involved in the ENACT organization, and I was mostly involved with the tutoring center. I ran that, and that took up most of my spare time, but we've got a lot of organizations, and my SCNM is where you can find all those organizations, and the student ambassadors can link you up. And lining our hallways, we have poster boards of the different organizations that we have as well.
Great. Thank you, my dear. Next one, Sara Jean, do you remember which book you used for biochemistry? I would like to go ahead and start studying for biochem.
That was a long time ago, but I believe it's Lippincott's biochemistry book is what I used. It has a blue cover. And that's a really good book. It's got great diagrams in it. So I'm pretty sure that's the name of the author of the biochemistry book I used. I think it was called Biochemistry.
Very good. Yeah, that was like your first or second quarter. All right, my next question, probably to either one of you ladies. Will first-year students have any free time during the weekends to have somewhat of a balance in their lives, or is it more predominantly an academic overload?
So I can respond to that. So both Sara Jean and I have indicated that you will be very busy and you will study a lot. But if you manage your time well and do as Sara Jean suggested and make sure that you get plenty of rest at night and you put your rest on your calendar and you put your study time on your calendar and then you're committed to your calendar, you can remain very healthy. Sometimes there are things scheduled on the weekend, but certainly not every weekend. And of course you have your evenings. And also I will tell you that when we revised the curriculum a few years ago, we reduced the number of contact hours or seat hours that you have in class. We reduced the number of hours by about 200. And the reason we did this is 200 throughout the 4 years. The reason we did this is because we listened to students and we heard that students needed more time outside of class. And so that's one thing that we've worked into our curriculum now so that you do have that time.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Does Naturopath Without Borders go to other places beyond Mexico?
The organization, there's 2 doctors who run that right now, and they have a center in Haiti as well, and I believe students also go to Haiti and work in a birthing center. Right now, the only outside of our country setup we have that they go, I think they go once a month down to Mexico. I'm pretty sure Mexico is the only place because it's so close to Phoenix and it's easy for students to drive there. I also have heard of students going to the Philippines, but again, I would contact the people who run that organization, and the student ambassadors can hook you up, because I think that every year a new student runs the organization, so I'm not sure who runs it this year. But yes, they go all over the world, but you can make anything happen you want to do with SCNM.
Great. Thanks, Sara Jean. I'm going to take a couple more, and I think I've filtered out all of the questions or answered all the questions that were in the box, but I do have a couple more. What is the average amount of time you spend in the clinic your first quarter?
So in your first quarter, you actually are in clinical practice lab. Sometimes that lab occurs over in the clinic area, and sometimes it does not, depending on our lab space availability. So you will not actually be in the clinic at that time, but you will be learning clinical skills, again, which is very critical step to when you actually do go to the clinic and work with real patients. One thing to remember, in your first year, you are in field observation with those 60 contact hours where you're shadowing a physician in the community. So you do have some face-to-face time in a clinic.
Thanks, Dr. Clark. Sara Jean, this one's coming to you. What has helped you decide on going into private practice?
The question would be helpful if I knew what the alternatives were that the student was, or the person was thinking that they're asking this. I guess the alternatives in my head to private practice would be to take a residency or join with someone else, maybe. And I have a big business background. My dad's an entrepreneur, so I'm all about going into business for myself. And I chose private practice because I really enjoy seeing patients and I love helping people. So that is pretty much the best way to help someone, is face-to-face work through their health concerns. And you could ask that person, though, what the other things they were thinking would be my other choices. That would be helpful, too. Okay.
Yeah, and if this person is still in here in the room, you're more than welcome to shoot me another question, and I'll refer that to Sara Jean. I do have 2 more in here. Do new students have mentors? And if they do, are they students or faculty or both?
So Sara Jean, you want to talk about student mentors?
Sure thing. The answer is both. And there is a peer mentoring program that is run by students where 2 students run that program, take every student who enters into SCNM and they pair them with an upperclassman, and they try to match by age and interest and everything else, so it's someone that really you can connect with well. So every student that enters SCNM is matched with a student mentor.
Great, great. And my last question, what quarter do we first enter the Cadaver Lab?
Sara Jean, you want to also take that one?
Sure. You enter the Cadaver Lab, I'm not sure if it's your first day of school, but it would be in your first week, likely, of school that you enter the Cadaver Lab.
Great. Thanks, Sara Jean. And I think that fulfills all of the questions that we had. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my next slide. More than likely, I don't need to go over this. These are the admissions prerequisites, of course, that I'm sure every one of you are aware of, because these are students that are already been accepted and are coming in. So again, here's a list of our prerequisites in case you've forgotten, which I'm sure you haven't. But if you have any questions on those, just let me know. And other than that, my information again is j.durham@scnm.edu. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any other questions regarding admissions. But other than that, on behalf of SCNM, I would like to thank each of you for attending the webinar. I hope it's been helpful. Our next webinar is scheduled for July 24th from 10 to 11. And that topic is going to be SCNM's ND shadowing program out of the classroom and into the clinic. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Other than that, this concludes our webinar. So have a great day.